Folks, no grand intro, no fancy graphics for today. Our pal John will see them soon. There are many, many on this platform, John. I know you're aware there's a lot of different moving pieces, but we do not yet have the Impact pay-per-view intro video. Maybe one day, maybe it could be a clip of Dom West or something. I don't know. But no big intro. We're going to give them some wrestling talk. We are here, Late Night Grin, Impact Wrestling Emergence review show. John, this is your first time on the platform.
Yes,
You
it
and I
is.
shared the screen for a Ring of Honor preview, right? Over on True Hill Heat, which was a hell of a time. So, how are you today, pal?
I'm good, man. How are you? I'm glad to be here. I'm just glad to be here. This was a great pay-per-view. But if you think about it, not having any crazy intro videos is
Yeah.
very similar to how Impact presents these monthly specials. There's no fuss, there's no muss. They just get
No,
right to the wrestling. So
it's
it's
true.
it's on brand.
I do wonder what like the Late Night Grin equivalent of their opening videos are. You know, with the narrator, you know,
Yeah.
it's always like the biggest match ever. It's like the battle of a lifetime. Like our equivalent of that would be interesting. But yeah, it's kind of a weird. We were just talking before we went on. That's why we kind of went a little bit early because we were just already reviewing the show, right? So I was like, let's get into it. These are weird shows, right? Like they're. I think you and I would agree as we're about to review this thing. This is a hell of a show. Did you see a lot of buzz for this? Because I unfortunately didn't see much, which is a shame considering the quality of it. What did you see?
Yeah, I mean, if you are in the circles that discuss Impact and that
Yeah.
follow Impact, then yes, you would definitely have known about it. Like, I mean, for
Mm-hmm.
me, I'm in a couple Discords here and there. For example, a few Facebook groups like the True Heels Facebook group,
Mm-hmm.
and there's conversation there. But
Yeah.
outside of that, in the larger groups or larger pages that mainly focus on the big two, there's really not that much conversation about the monthly specials.
It's interesting, right? Because I think, in fairness to Impact, that is kind of an industry wide issue right now, right?
Yeah,
Like, I think even if you look at the G1, you can kind of see like it's the big two, and that's about it on a kind of wider sense, which we'll get into a little bit as we go. Before we do, John, tell the people about what you do over on True Who, because I know I was unfamiliar until we did a show together, right? The Ring of Honor preview show. And I know that, they're friends of ours and they do 101 different things over there. So explain a bit what you kind of do on that platform, give them an idea.
yeah. So what I do is I cover AEW Dark Elevation, and
Mm-hmm.
NWA Power. That's one show
Yeah.
called Dark Power, and then I'm also on Rampage Wrap Up on the weekends with Josh, where we talk about the AEW Rampage episodes. And we also have we have so many different shows covering every single different topic that you can think of. We have
Mm-hmm.
watch alongs for Raw, for SmackDown, for Rampage, for NXT, for Impact as well. Blunt Impact, Ness and Chris over there doing great things. We have so many different things that we talk about. We have the main flagship show
Right.
on Saturdays, and yeah, it's just a great time there on the channel. I love it.
It is. I see them very much as like our spiritual cohort. Here, look at this. SP3 in the chat. Remember the crossover we never did. There you go, man. Like I've said to SP3 before. I think he and I, kindred spirits. He's like the good version of me. He's very successful, but we're very similar in our outlook. So, with that in mind, let's get into. I asked you when we was kind of booking this. I was like, "Have you covered Impact?" You said briefly, right? In 2020,
Yeah,
you said.
yeah.
So, tell me about kind of your Impact coverage, and then more broadly, how much you watch their product as of right now.
So right now, I would say that I watch week to week.
Right.
I definitely keep up with Ness on Blunt Impact, so I know what's happening. But
Mm-hmm.
on a week to week basis, usually what'll happen is if I see Ness talking about something that interests me or some good match, then I'll go back and I'll watch it. But when I was covering it, I was watching weekly, and that was a great time because Impact does have a lot of like some great quality talent on their roster, and so being able to see those people and keep up with them is a lot of fun. It's just life got a little busy for me, so had to
Well,
move one to the side.
that's kind of the story of Impact, and I don't mean
Yeah,
this
yeah,
as
yeah.
it
It
is right.
really is. It
I
really
don't mean it
is.
as an insult, but it's like I think anyone that's watched it in the last few years can agree it's actually a really competent wrestling promotion at this point. They have good wrestling every week, and these pay-per-views, which we'll get into, are like very good almost every month. But it does struggle to convince the wider audience that it's essential viewing, right? That's its biggest challenge, has always been. I don't know if they've got there yet. I'm not sure they will, to be honest with you, because we all have that story, right? I was watching it, it was a good time, and then this happened, that happened, and I stopped watching it. It's kind of tale as old as time. It's unfortunate. But
It's really funny because, for years, people every year were saying this is the year that TNA goes out of business. This is the year that and no, by hook or by crook, whether it's people getting busy with their lives or whatever the case may be and losing touch with Impact stays there, and they stay putting out quality shows and slowly building the roster. Yeah, they lose people here and there, but they always find replacements. And one of the great things that Scott D'Amore has done is being able to identify key players. And if he loses somebody, being able to bring somebody else in that will fill that role so that he doesn't lose an overall level of quality in the product.
It's really interesting because, I mean, I didn't watch the pre-show. I watched the main show, but they showed a highlight of the Knockouts tag titles switched, right? And Deonna and Chelsea won the belts. And it's like, you would have assumed or predicted that with AEW being, such a strong force and WWE always hiring, you would have assumed the Impact roster would have fallen away some. And it's like, I would argue it's as strong as it's been since like the Spike era. I mean, they're deep right now. I mean, there's a Ray Horace match on here, just because, which obviously, it was kind of a guest spot. But that's one thing. Do you think they get enough credit for this roster's sneaky deep? In all truth, it's interesting.
I think that they would not get the credit. I don't think they get the credit they deserve, but I also think that they have been smart in how they have benefited from other things happening to other companies. Yeah. Like when WWE releases happen, or for example, when we'll be talking about them, Honor No More, bringing them over from Ring of Honor and really making them a hallmark of the product. Some people may, this is a storyline that's been going on since January, so maybe people are getting a little bit tired of Honor No More, but you can't deny that Impact hasn't found a way to use them. And that's to your point, it is an incredibly deep roster. I don't think they do get the credit for it.
It's very, very interesting. It's kind of a theme of these conversations, I think, goes under the radar. Quick couple of things here, housekeeping notes. Shout out to JJ, who's resubscribed. Been subscribed now for 3 months. He says, "Oh, how? Impact Emergence was a fantastic show. Sammy Macklin was awesome, and as much as I wanted to see Shelley win, Josh retaining was the right choice." We'll get into all that more. Thank you, JJ. And also, JR subscribed to his 3rd month. He says, "Oh, how?" Okay, well, let's get into it. Quick thing on the Impact front. It appeared they moved some tickets for this one. It didn't look like, an empty room.
Yeah.
I'm pleading with anyone who watches this that's in any kind of position of power. We need to experiment with other hard camera. It was a great solution in the pandemic, but if there's 400 people there, I want to see some of them. This shot of the rampway, I find it to be kind of it's so sterile, man. It's just it doesn't do much for me. But I will say the crowd was hot, which is something we'll get in as we go. So let's get into the opener. X Division title, one of the wrestlers of the year thus far, Speedball Mike Bailey, against Jack Evans. And this was a big deal for Jack, right? I mean, this was a big opportunity for him post AEW. I think everyone has a great deal of respect for Jack's career, and especially has loved the way he's handled his kind of AEW fallout. He's been marvelous in that regard. I thought he looked really good. Physically, he looks great.
Yeah, he looks like he's gained some weight.
Yeah, he looks strong,
muscle,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, and his hair's ground back out, which is necessary because that was a rough look for a while there on the. I know you covered Darks. You would have seen some of those post shave. Look. Yeah, it was a look. But I would look really good. I thought the match actually was a lot more reserved than I thought it would be. I sort of thought it would be a moves fest, and I don't mean that as an insult. I thought it was damn good. What do you think of it?
So I thought it was a great opener, a really smart choice to open the show. And I agree with you. Yeah, they seemed almost as though they were holding back. Yeah. But at the same time, they were able to get everything in that they needed to get in. I think that, I think they benefited from being the first match simply because usually a first match will always get a bigger reaction than maybe it should or shouldn't. It's because it's that opening match. And so they kind of knew that. And I think the idea here was to maybe down the road revisit this And that will be where they really kick it into a high gear. And this was to give these guys a chance to really feel each other out, because Speedball is somebody who hits really, really hard, and he moves very quickly. And Jack Evans is somebody who moves very quickly as well. And he's a pretty good technical wrestler in his own right. So I think that here they just were like, look, let's get you guys in the ring together, see what chemistry we've got. And that's something that's super important in a match. And give us a good match that will keep this momentum going as we get through the show. But I think both guys really knocked it out of the park. Jack Evans does look great coming out of his AEW run. He did add some muscle, and yeah, you're right, the hair growing back is probably the best the best part of all of this for him. Maybe he maybe on the way out of AEW, QT gave him like some coupons or whatever to the hair plug guy that helped him out, and he was like, listen, like, we can't keep you, but here's something to get the rest of your next run started.
I will say it will always stick with me that I'm almost certain the hair shave match did like a good Rampage number, which is like peak pro wrestling. Of course, people tuned in for that. Orange Cassidy and Jack Evans, the hair, incredible stuff. Yeah, absolutely, as you said, man. I mean, they got 12 minutes, but because they paced it more steadily than like a sprint, it felt like they got a lot of time to actually have like a real match. And again, look, there's nothing wrong with moves matches, right? I mean, they're very exciting. There's one late with Bandito that was tremendous, but this did have some more substance. So I appreciated they didn't just have a straight babyface match, and Jack Evans was kind of a dick, which I think is his peak form right at this point.
Yeah.
Shout out to Tom Hannafin too. I thought did a really nice job of. I liked the way that he kind of contrasted their striking styles. Right, Jack Evans is less output, more quality, whereas Speedball is so quick. It's like there's a contrast there. Styles make fights kind of deal. So I thought it was a tremendous opener. What do you think? Evans, he feels like he should be sticking around in Impact for a little bit, doesn't he?
Yeah, I don't know if he officially signed with them or not.
I do not believe so.
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, if that's the case, then they probably are going to be using him a lot in these tapings that are going to be coming up. But yeah, if he can stick with Impact, that'll be like just how we're talking, underrated roster. You add a piece, you add a piece, you add a piece. And Evans has something that X division kind of doesn't lack, but enhances, I would say.
I think so.
And him being able to have great matches against people like Chris Bay, like Ace Austin from Bullet Club, that's going to be something that's really crucial to continuing to build that division. I hope he does stick around.
Yeah, he gives it a kind of veteran presence, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing he adds. And he's not a veteran you need to push. I mean, Jack's great, but he's not going to be your world champion or anything like that. He's a guy who can slot into the division and kind of be a valuable piece in that regard. I'm intrigued. Where do you stand on Speedball's kind of Impact ceiling? Obviously, he's one of the hottest wrestlers around right now. And as great as he is as a fit as X Division champion, there's always a lot of conversation about will he eventually go for the big one? What do you think?
I think he does have that option. I mean, that ceiling there to be a world champion. I think for me, it's gonna have to. It will depend on how he evolves the character. Because right now, a lot of it is a focus on the moves and the in-ring work, which is great. But you've got to be able to talk, and you've got to be able to talk in promos and against an opponent and go have that back and forth. And he has that, but I haven't seen it rise to the level of being somebody who I could say, yeah, this could be a world champion. So I think that that's going to be one of the things that he really needs to work on. And I think that they can pair him in some of these feuds with some people who will be able to help him elevate his game. For example, you could put him up against somebody like Diener. And this isn't to say that Diener is a great talker on the mic, but Eric Young is. Right. And if Eric Young is talking for Diener in the feud and doing some of the back and forth, or maybe it's just that Eric Young says, we want the X Division Championship, I'm sending Diener. Right. And it's really a proxy war between Bailey and Eric Young. Eric Young is somebody who will help Speedball get to another level when it comes to his mic skills.
Yeah, I agree. Someone who can kind of direct traffic in that regard, right? And kind of give the angle like a hook. It's very interesting. I agree with you. My instinctual reaction to the promos too. The other problem they have is because their formatting is somewhat traditional in the sense that you will see a world champion do an in-ring promo or do a contract signing as we saw on Thursday. That feels like something that's not in his game right now, right? And as you said, it could change. You could pair him with the right guys. perhaps obviously you could argue the real answer is don't do those segments, but it is what it is. This is an interesting question. I like this. What do you think of the like Friday night special thing? It seems vaguely insane to me. Where do you stand on Friday nights for an event night?
Listen, I am happy that anything is on a weekday night sometimes, because it adds a element of must see to it. And it's one of those situations where if it's a great test for Impact, not from a viewership perspective, like are we going to get the viewers that we want, but are we putting on the quality of matches and the quality of shows that would make someone say, I'm interested in tuning into this. And they might see a little bit of a drop off here and there, for whatever reason. But I think that it's a smart move in a weird way, because it adds to this element of an underground feel to it, right? Like this kind of, in the Impact circles, it's a must see kind of thing. So I think it's interesting in its own way. But I'm glad that they're trying something different. That's really what you got to keep doing.
It's almost like you say it adds to that kind of vibe. It's like the Impact fan can put their head on the pillow and say we had the best matches tonight, and hey, look, they did on Friday, right? Like, I mean, I'm told Shinsuke and Gunter was very good. I've genuinely not seen it, but I'm sure that was very good. But other than that, there was some really good wrestling on this show. So, absolutely, it's an interesting element for sure. They started the Sami Callihan, Steve Maclin business here. We'll circle back to that. That was a whole deal, right? We'll circle back. So let's jump into Violent by Design. We're just talking about Dina and Eric Young. They were here in tag team action against Kushida and Chris Sabin. Again, Kushida is quite the addition, even if it's just, in and out, which I think it most will be guest spots. It's still a hell of a deal. Now, this is something that I think has been a real strength of these shows. We just talked about the opener and saying it wasn't kind of balls to the wall, right? They just had a nice match. I thought this was such a smart match in the sense that it wasn't a classic. It wasn't one for your spreadsheet or whatever else. But it was pros being like, look at this lineup. It ain't our night to have the show still. Let's just have a good tag team match. This worked to a traditional format. Let's get a little bit of heat, feed a hot tag, go into our finish, and we'll get out of there fine, and the crowd will be with it. I thought they nailed it in that sense. I think there's a version of this match you could do on TV that's better and goes longer and is kind of more, epic. This was what this show needed. What do you think of the tag team match here?
So this is Scott D'Amore saying, okay, I know I'm going to get momentum starting off because it's that first match. What's my second match going to do? It's got to keep that momentum going. And like you said, an in, out, get on your way, do what needs to get done, and move the show along. And this was a really cool moment here because, is Sabin an honorary time splitter, or is Kushida an honorary machine gun? That's kind of and it's kind of cool because they have Sabin doing some time splitter moves, but then they have Kushida doing some gun moves, and it's just kind of a cool thing that you got to tip your hat to, because you kind of know that they're going to do it or that they should do it, but seeing it being done so well, it's just like, that's really cool. And Eric Young and Diener getting the win felt like the right thing to do, because Eric Young and Diener are more of an established group, whereas Kushida and Sabin, while they are doing time splitter moves and doing machine gun moves, they should not be as well oiled as if it was Shelley teaming with the other. So I thought it was a good way to continue the momentum going for the show.
I think the topic of the finish is so interesting because I actually completely agree with you. Within this world, which is this is Impact, this is what the promotion is. I think it was the right finish. But this is one of those weird impact-isms where for a fact there are people that woke up on Saturday morning, looked at the results and was like, wait, why did Sabin and Kushida, these guys who are, Sabin and Kushida and Shelley could be on AEW Dynamite next Wednesday and that audience would pop for them. Whereas I think Dina's a good pro and Eric Young has been a good pro for 20 years, but they are Impact guys, right? And the audience's mind. Do you think that's a hard balance for Impact? Well, because while we both agree this was the right finish for this particular story, I can't help but wonder that's one of their issues is that when you're in Impact, you kind of become a part of the furniture in that way. It's a really interesting challenge, I think, to have with guys that are Impact guys as opposed to guys that are just wrestling stars stopping for Impact. What do you think?
See, Yeah, I can see what you're saying, but at the same time, a part of me feels as though it's not always a bad thing
Yeah.
because it's something that needs to be done. It's something that should be done. So
Hmm.
it's kind of like why mess with like what the logical thing to do is. Like
Right.
this is a situation where Violent by Design should get the win. And
Hmm.
yes, Saban and Kushida are the bigger stars, but Kushida is not somebody who's going to suffer that much from taking a loss here, and Saban definitely isn't. So you can do what you can to help Violent by Design, and you can always get Kushida a win back later if
Hmm.
you really feel as though he needs to. And yeah, to your point, he is going to be more of a stop and go kind of guy in Impact. So why not protect more of your Impact talent?
Yeah, no, I'm with you absolutely. It's such an interesting. I mean, look, here's a perfect example. A couple months ago, I did Slammiversary, right, or last month, whenever it was. It feels like years ago now. So much has happened. But they did Slammiversary, and Eric Young was the main event. And
Right.
anyone that's watched Eric Young's career knew he was not going to have a bad match in that spot. He just
Right.
wasn't. He works too hard. He's too much of a pro. He's going to have a good match. But there was a wider sentiment among people that aren't, Impact fans instead of just sort of wrestling fans of why is Eric Young in the main event? And that's where I think their split personality is a strength because it allows them cool matches like this and a variety show vibe. But I do think that's one of their kind of challenges, hurdles to overcome, I guess, with this I put it. Guys that the wider wrestling audience sees as that's a guy who belongs in Impact versus guys that are stopping through. Isn't interesting. I don't know the right answer to be clear. I just think it's an interesting thing to kick around.
Yeah, I think in that kind of situation, the question really does go back to that idea of whether or not Impact the audience, right?
Yeah.
Is how many people are actively watching and how
Hmm.
many of them are really talking about shows like this. Because if you are paying attention to, and the issue there, and that's where I can see the problem with it is if somebody is not as aware of the Impact product as they could be or maybe should
Right.
be, would they then want to watch Slammiversary seeing that match? Like,
Hmm.
just if you just see we're gonna have we're gonna have him defending against Eric Young,
Right.
would that be something that you tune into? Maybe that is hurting that ability to draw people into the fold. But I don't
Hmm.
know. It feels as though it's worked for Impact for such a
Yeah.
long time that I don't know. There doesn't seem a reason to go away from it.
It's interesting for sure. There was a moment I reviewed one of their TVs. I think it was the one with Saban and Shelley wrestling. I want to say it was. There was one deal where
That
they
number
did
one
that.
contender.
Yeah, I believe it was that one. I could be wrong. I think it may have been a Kushida match, but it was recent TV and Violent by Design hit the ring afterwards. And it gives me I find it jarring sometimes because while I like the act and Joe Doring is, I think I'm so happy for him that he's getting any kind of spotlight like this. I think it's great. But it is, I could definitely see someone stopping in, being like, "Why is this happening?" So it's interesting. Quickly on Kushida, are you excited for this post WWE run? He seems to be off to a good start. Obviously, one of the great wrestlers of the last decade and change. Where are you at on Kushida at this point?
So I was never really the biggest Kushida fan. However, what I will say is I do feel bad for the guy in that he wanted to be in the
Yeah,
heavyweight division for New Japan, and New Japan was like, "Yeah, but have you seen our junior division? We really need some help here, buddy." And so he was like, "I guess he said, fine, whatever, I'll be in the junior." But I think that he is somebody who is well poised if he did make that transition to the heavyweights, maybe next year or the year after. He would have some amazing matches
hmm
because of that size differential. He'd probably gain some weight for sure, but because of his smaller size, because of his ability to move around the ring, I don't consider him, I consider Osprey better than him.
right.
However, I would say that it would be very similar to Osprey's
hmm
transition to the heavyweights. And that's something I'll be looking forward to watching.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I will say too, and this is one for you and I especially. I think he's a name to circle in regards to the revived Ring of Honor. I think he could
Yes.
definitely be a guy
Yes.
they book because they're putting in a tape like once a month, right?
Mhm.
Most likely. He's definitely a guy I think you can I wouldn't say assume, but it feels very likely he's going to show up on that front, right? It just feels like the right kind of talent. Tony would love
Yeah.
that.
I feel as though he's going to really serve also a good purpose in New Japan Strong.
Yes.
That's
Absolutely.
also going to be a great home for him as well.
Yeah. Talk about good shows that more people should watch, right?
Yeah.
Strong is like it's like its own island. There was an amazing moment. I believe it was this weekend they crowned the tag champs finally on
Yeah.
Strong. and they did a SummerSlam weekend show, and Ian Riccaboni just said who wins the belts, and it's like, man, like even the announcers, like no one's gonna watch it. It's like, it's crazy. That show's like it's like a secret. It's such a good program. It's hard, man. Eyes, there's a different shot every night, right?
I do want to say, because you reminded me of something. So I haven't watched outside of the few times that I've watched WWE to help out True Heels. I have not watched WWE since I think April 2020.
Right.
And so sometimes when I'm watching Impact, hearing Tom's commentary almost throws me for a loop, because I'm like, why is Michael Cole here? Because if you listen very closely, he does some of the same vocal mannerisms as Michael Cole, because that's who he learned from. And so it's just because you brought up Riccaboni, so like it got me thinking about commentators. But Hannah fans, sometimes it just has this like just Michael Coleism about him, and I'm like, wow, like you don't always think about the impact, no pun intended, of mentors on people that they've trained, and Cole really has had a huge impact on his commentary.
I will say, and I know you don't watch, like Cole has been, it's hilarious. Like the cliche of Cole is better without Vince. That being true again immediately is incredible. Like what a bit that is. It's 100% real. I will say, I think Tom does a great job, and I think he's been a great addition, because I think the team before was struggling a little bit. It is the thing you mentioned about the Cole, like kind of nature of his voice. It does strike me that's like where we're kind of headed, right? Like, we all roll our eyes at JR, and rightly so, and Tony, who like it sure feels like in 20 years it could just be a bunch of Tom Hannah fans. Like, there was someone doing a podcast like this, being like, man, when I was a kid, they had Tom Phillips. That dude he was the real deal. It's a weird vibe, man. That's
why I would love for somehow, some way, if Tony could get Mauro Ranallo.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it would be so much better. Not that commentary in AEW is necessarily that bad, but like if you paired someone like Mauro Ranallo with a Taz, I feel like that would be really phenomenal.
I've seen a lot of debate about Mauro, and there was even debate today because someone tweeted about Triple H bringing him back. And there was a whole debate about it. I've always liked Mauro. He's very divisive in some ways. Again, I wonder about kind of what his schedule looks like.
Yeah.
Because he did a spot for Impact, right? He did the Kenny match. Remember that was a thing?
Yes.
I wonder if he could do stuff like that, like specials and stuff.
It's for AEW, I don't think I'd want him every week.
Right.
For sure, no. Like maybe just the pay-per-views and maybe like the Battle of the Belts, that kind of stuff. Like just to add that next level feel to it. The same way that AEW is saying, hey, JR is only going to be on the second hour for Dynamite. And here in Impact, to bring it back to Impact, I think that Matt and Tom, they have a good chemistry together. They really do play off of each other very well.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I'm on your side of the Mauro thing. I just think some of us kind of long for announcers having their own, their own shtick, and like Tom and Matt are really solid, but they don't like have very many calls where you go, my God, they're really feeling it right now.
Right.
They call the action, and they're good at it,
And so that I think goes back to Michael Cole teaching Tom Phillips a certain way, but that being the Vince way that he wanted Michael Cole to teach Tom Phillips. So that's why it's really interesting to hear some of those Cole mannerisms, to be like, you can break out a little bit from this, buddy.
His tone, like the way he goes up and and stuff.
That's exactly. It's exactly
pure Cole. It's pretty crazy. Yeah. Kenny King was out next. He called out Heath. They had Macklin and Sammy reappear, and then he was distracted long enough, and Heath came in. I would say Kenny King. This was quite a task, making this seem like organic and believable. I thought he did as good a job as you can, considering that he called someone out and was immediately distracted from them. I thought he did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
This is in fear of going in circles, John. This is kind of another example of what I was talking about. Heath is definitely one of those guys that, if you watch the show, you may be into the Redheaded Rebel, but you throw up a Heath graphic, people are not really in on it. It's a challenging thing,
Their first thought is, doesn't he have kids or something like that? Right, that's their first thought. Yeah.
What did you think of this Heath Kenny King business?
So, I'm not from Chicago, but I live in Chicago. I appreciated some of the Chicago shout outs from the show. But Kenny King just, I don't know if we do kind of like a MVP or LVP. He gets one of the LVP nominations for the night for calling them out. Then when Macklin and Sammy show up, he's just like, yeah, beat his ass. I'm just gonna completely turn my back. And then of course, the best part of it is Heath comes out, rolls into the ring, and waits for Kenny King to turn around. It's like, dude, just go up there and beat the shit out of him. And Kenny King turns around. He's like, there's like this moment where he's like frozen in fear. Like, wait,
called him out, man.
Wait a minute. I didn't think he'd actually show up.
Yeah, it was strange. I feel like Kenny maybe, would have been in fair position to be like, hey guys, can we do something different? Like maybe, can we maybe look less like an asshole on the TV? I guess it's fine. He's a heel.
And then the Heath thing at the end where he's with Gia was funny as hell too, because I was like, Heath, you do realize you're asking a Chicago Midwest crowd to give you a rebel yell. Like, you do understand, like, this doesn't, like, it's not the right demographic. All right, buddy.
It's just, it's hard because, like, I'm not saying Heath's not a good talent, or it's just like, I wonder who in the Impact audience is like, oh, fuck yeah, like Heath. Like, I wonder who that. This is what always intrigues me about the ex-WWE guys. Like, is that an audience is there a person that watches WWE and then follows Heath to Impact? Is that a thing that or are we just saying he's a good talent, he should be in the promotion? I don't know.
Well, the way Impact built him up back when they first got him, you think that people were. But yeah, I can't really think of anybody. Like the one guy in a 3-man band who didn't do anything. The one guy out of Nexus that didn't do anything.
It's weird, man. It's weird. And again, it's not even a knock on him, right? It's just
no.
It's just a weird deal.
And I will say, like, when he's during that segment, he just looked like he was living his best life. Like, he was just like, he's like, I'm here, I'm happy, I'm moisturized, I'm living my best life.
Yeah. He's having a good time. He's fun. It's just an interesting. Their roster's such a mix of kind of philosophies. It's interesting. Speaking of such, Bandito. This is great horrors up next.
What a transition!
This is what I'm talking about. It's a unique deal. Obviously, it's kind of a special occasion thing to have this match on. Bandito may be sticking around. I don't know. I mean, it appears there's no interest from either, which I find to be insane. Like, it's kind of puzzling to me. I don't really get it, but I thought it took a little while to click, and then when it did, it went wild. I mean, Horace had that crazy dive over the top. Bandito did some of his great power spots, the big deadlift, suplex. I mean, it was a hell of a time. What did you think of this one, pal?
I mean, this was a throwback to some old Ring of Honor stuff, like, and they which they even alluded to as talking about Mexa Squad with Flamita. But this match was really well done to me. I think that it was kind of the crowd was into it because, it does have that special attraction kind of banner to it. So it's like, we're going to see something we don't normally see. But I also think that this was a match that for these guys, they could do in their sleep. Like they've wrestled with each other and against each other so many times that it's just a match that they can do in their sleep. And something that's, we were talking about that earlier with Speedball and Jack Evans. Get them in the ring, see if they have that chemistry. These two guys are two guys that have that chemistry with each other. And it's one of those kind of effortless, I know where you'll be, you know where I'll be. It just flows. And I will say that some of the like the tit for tat kind of bits were a little bit like, I didn't need it. I didn't need it, but I was like, okay, I mean, I see what they're going for. All right. Like, as long as it's executed well, I'll be like, okay, I can let some spots go. But that deadlift
was crazy, man. He went up like a bullet. It was nuts, right?
And he's just holding him there. I'm like, wait a minute. If he falls, I was like, oh God.
Yeah.
Don't drop him.
What did you think of the double knockout spot? That was one for me where I kind of went, oh, I understand it, but I don't know. Like the most set up on line,
It was like a pure lucha moment to me, because I was like, this is what I would expect that they were gonna do if they were down somewhere in Mexico just doing a show. It's a spot that and then of course we'll sit I think it was Hannafed. He was like, Brothers of Destruction be damned. I was like, okay, he didn't need that reference.
That was a wild reference for this. Like, I get what he was going for. My God. Yeah, it had big, like, greatest hits energy. It was like, let's go there and, let's play the hits, have some fun. And listen, the crowd loved it. This is one of the more interesting things to talk about, I think. This was Chicago crowd, which obviously there's always a perception of Chicago crowds. They're like just wrestling fans, right? That's always the kind of wider. And obviously, while it isn't a huge crowd, I think that was noticeable here. Did the reaction to this match, in your view, to me, this was very promising and encouraging from an Impact perspective, because the crowd being into this tells me that the general wrestling fan is starting to come around to the idea of going to Impact shows. Because there was a time where when outsiders were coming to Impact, the crowd would only know them if they'd been on their TV. I thought this was encouraging in that regard.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I think it is a pretty good example of that, a good evidence for that. But at the same time, even if you aren't that familiar with Ray Horace, a lot of people do know Bandito. Mm-hmm. So it is a step in the right direction, and I'd like to see them continue with it, and I'd like to see how they're going to build on this AAA relationship that they have. I mean, a lot of the AAA titles are just in AEW, with the exception of all of the ones that are on. The guy holding out of their 3 singles titles, if I remember right, one is the world titles on Vikingo, but the rest are on Ray Phoenix, actually. Yeah. So yeah, almost all of them are in AEW. But yeah, there's got to be a way that they can continue to build on this relationship, and I think, or I hope, that having this match will give people like Scott D'Amore backstage in Impact more reason to try it. And that's Impact trying new things, and I'm here for it.
It's really interesting. Like, we've talked about it a lot, and we keep going back to it, right? Like, Impact right now is a blend of, like, a cool, I don't mean this as an insult, but like a cool super indie that hosts things that happen in wrestling at the moment, like hot things in wrestling. Like, Bandito just stops through and you get a cool match. And it's like, they do a lot of stuff like that now, but it's also the kind of place to reinvent ex-WWE guys. Yeah. And that marriage is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just an interesting thing to watch. Like, we just did it. Heath cut a promo, cut to the ring for Bandito. It's like, listen, man, you can't say they ain't trying. They're certainly trying. Let's circle back to Sami Callihan and Steve Maclin, because this is where they had their actual match. I do have to say, because this was incredible. So Moose had a promo. They overlap with that. Before we do this, actually, shout out to Brian, who was resubscribed for 2 months. It's resubscribed. Prime, thank you very much, Brian. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Brian.
They had Moose and they overlapped into this, and they're doing this brawl. And they had the nerve to build to Scott D'Amore's music. They played it, and Tom was like, oh my God. And I was like, what is it? Who is it? And then just Scott D'Amore has like his own graphic and it flashed up. I couldn't believe that was a deal. Anyway, they started an ODQ match. Before we even get to the match itself, where did you stand on all of this, like, kind of shenanigans presentation wise? The brawling through the crowd, the Scott D'Amore music. Where did you stand on all of this business?
So it reminded me of Dean Ambrose and Brody Lee.
Yeah,
having, I think it was another last man standing match.
I remember the match 2015.
Yeah. And them starting the match, leaving the ring, the rest of the show continuing, and then all of a sudden them coming back and having the remainder of the match. Now, my only reason, the thing that I didn't like about this was that the match didn't actually start, right? Yeah. Like, they were brawling outside and they just kept going. Like, in my mind, the ref should have thrown the match out completely and said neither man is fit to continue. Mm-hmm. Like, they shouldn't have even had the option of having this. And if they had rang the bell, then you would count up both guys out. Mm-hmm. So that part of it was throwing me for a loop as they were, and then just showing, like, having them come out again and then go back with during the Heath and Kenny King thing. I was like, all right, cool. Like, I could see it as soon as they came out the second time. I was like, this is going to end up back in the ring. But then I'm like, wait a minute, they never actually rang the bell. Like, they never started anything. Right. And so then Moose, who to me is a complete innocent in this, right? I believe Moose. I take him at his word when he says he has nothing to do with any of this. And then he gets pulled into this because who attacks him? Sami Callihan attacks him. And so he gets dragged into this whole thing. And so what's Scott D'Amore's brilliant idea? He says, I'm going to make this a no DQ match. But, Moose, you're banned from ringside in a no
Immediate.
DQ match.
Strong authority figure, brother.
Wait a minute. What are we doing here? Moose didn't even do anything. He got attacked. It's his.
Look, man.
If anything, you should have turned this into a 2-on-1 handicap match and let them beat that
Justice.
asshole Sami Callihan down. He attacked the man backstage.
Scott's got his music. He has to protect his integrity as an authority figure. You know, he weren't doing no jobs tonight, brother. It was what it was. But that was. I'm with you. Watching it, I was like working on under the idea that they had already started the match, and then when he was like, "We'll start now," I was like, "Okay, fine." It was the match itself. I thought was kind of refreshingly heated.
Yeah,
Macklin getting busted open like actively popped me because I thought they were going to do plunder and like that's fine, but it was actually kind of brutal and kind of grueling in a way. Crowd were way into this, by the way. Everything we just talked about with the brawling worked a treat for this crowd. They loved it. They were firmly behind Sami. It was a good time. I didn't think it was, blow or anything, but I'm high on Macklin and what he's given them. I think he's a great example of an actual guy who's reinvented himself.
Yeah.
He will probably be in a very nice position now that Triple H is back in power up there, but he's done a hell of a time in Impact. So I thought this match was a really good time. What did you think of the match itself?
I thought the match was really well done. I can't lie. I wasn't expecting too much out of this once Scott said it was going to be a no DQ match, because I was like, okay, like this is just going into Callahan's wheelhouse. It's really there's nothing fair really for Macklin. This isn't Macklin's wheelhouse, and it should be a fair fight. But then seeing that viciousness from Macklin really was like, okay, this is you always got to punch up to the level of your opponent. And that's not to say that Macklin isn't a talent. It's to say that no DQ matches are not his wheelhouse. And so he had to push himself to get into that. And I don't know who authorized the number of what looked like unprotected chair shots that we got to Macklin. But if I was Deanna backstage, I would be like, okay.
Yeah, it's wild.
I still need to get married to this person. Like we need to have a wedding very soon. Like can we roll this along? Oh, there's another one. Oh boy. Oh, you threw the chair so hard and in such a way that it latched itself onto.
Dude, that's my favorite because there was a couple actual headshots in this that were like swings.
Yeah.
But my favorite thing that like current dumb wrestlers doing, and honestly, I have no problem with this. Everything in wrestling is dumb. Do your thing. Nothing to do with me. I'm not your parent or whatever. But this new thing where wrestlers think that if you just like throw the chair, that's fine. Like, that is an incredible bit that's happened in modern wrestling. Like, listen, bro, do not swing that chair at my head, but if you throw it as hard as you possibly can and it wraps around my skull, I'll be fine. Just launch it. So they did both in this. They, had their cake and ate it too. It was something, man. You're right. That was pretty wild to see in 2022. I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, it doesn't bother me, but I could see why people would be like, chill on that stuff. It was saying, Macklin, have you seen a lot of his Impact run? Because I've been really impressed. How much have you seen of Steve Macklin in Impact?
I wouldn't say I've seen a lot of it. I have seen some of it, but not enough to really be able to say that I think that, I think he definitely has earned the spot where he's at. And I think that he is slowly rising up. But I would say that I've seen some people say that he is a world champion material. And I don't know that for myself just because I haven't seen it as much. So that's where I would say my knowledge of him is.
I think that's fair. I mean, I think he's the kind of guy who's most valuable as being underneath that, right? Like the comparison I've always made, and this is ironic because this guy did win their world title, but I've always called him he's like Impact Sheamus. He's a guy who gives you really physical matches underneath. Obviously, again, Sheamus was pushed that level, but I think if you look at Sheamus' career, he's actually most valuable when he's not at that level. He's better as being like a kind of a premier role player, if that makes sense.
There are a lot of guys in wrestling who benefit when commentary is able to say this person is in the ring with a former world champion. And Sheamus is absolutely one of those people.
Yes.
Because, and I'm often reminded of Jericho talking to Vince and saying, Vince, when he was having his later runs in WWE before he left for New Japan and then AEW, him saying to Vince, look, you can have people beat me a lot. And you can keep saying former world champion, beat Steve Austin Rock on the same night. But if they don't see me win, It loses its value every time somebody pins me. And I think that's something that for Sheamus, we do see him lose, but we do see him win. And if Macklin is going to have that kind of a role or a similar position, I think actually he will be a world champion because he is perfect for down the road beating the shit out of somebody. And commentary is like, this is a former world champion. And then the person gets to comeback win over him.
I think the key with him will just be, and I mean, I said it in jest, but I think it's the truth. He absolutely is someone that the kind of PC crew, the Performance Center crew was like, they loved him.
Yeah.
So I absolutely think there'll be a contract waiting for him. And honestly, man, I mean, good for that dude. I think he's earned it. His run the first time was completely fucked over, right? So good luck to him. I think that'll be a factor in his future. But let's
ironically, his run was ruined by a former Impact guy.
Well, yeah. No one claims him anymore, let me tell you. Well, I'm sure someone does, but no one you want to talk to anyway. Do you think it's hard for Impact to keep Sami Callihan fresh and involved? Because I know he just came back from an injury, but God bless the guy. I feel like anytime I've gone to an Impact show or watched an Impact show in the last 4 years, he's doing a hardcore match. And it kind of, I know their audience loves him, but it's challenging, I think, right?
It can be a bit much, and that's why as soon as Scott D'Amore said this is going to be a no disqualification, I was like, God damn it! Why is it another one? Why? Why is it another one? Whether he's in hardcore matches with Eddie Edwards, whether it's here now with Macklin, just over the years, he just seems to be that. Who am I thinking of from back in the day? Maybe Jerry Lynn. Jerry Lynn used to have a lot of hardcore matches in old Impact, old TNA, and so did RVD and Abyss. And so it kind of feels as though he is that role like that. And you know what? This, in a weird way, goes back to what we were talking about and starting off with, where even when he loses somebody, Scott D'Amore is such a good identifier of talent that he can find somebody to fit in that role. Is Sami Callihan like an RVD or Jerry Lynn or Abyss? Absolutely not. Those are three very different wrestlers, and he himself is very different. But does he fill the role of Impact's hardcore no DQ guy? Yes, he absolutely does. So the character can be different, but D'Amore understands role players. Now, if she just cared a little bit more about Sami Callihan's body when Sami Callihan's 70, maybe it'd be nice.
I think Sami would have these matches anywhere.
That's true.
Yeah, he's in that kind of. It's interesting. You're right. It's definitely that's his role, right? That is definitely absolutely it. Shout out to my pal Chalk who gave out a community sub. If you got that sub, feel free to thank good brother in the chat. We appreciate you, Chalk. Okay, let's move forward here. On and No More, you mentioned them earlier. Up against Bullet Club. This has kind of been a thing as of late. The multi-man match on Impact shows, kind of in the middle. They're like these kind of long cool-down things they do. It's actually, they've done it consistently this year to mixed results, I would say. This was no DQ. I will say they're very seldom day full victims. I think they're very good at placement. This going after the last match was a mistake, right? That was strange. They brought at the bell. There was enough talent involved for this to be fun. It wasn't the most inspired effort. I think it's fair to say they mostly just kind of did, just filled their time and it was okay. I will say I was stunned at the result. I just thought this had to be it.
No,
because
can't be.
No way. What do you think? What do you think they're going with this then? Because I just feel like it has to end. Ring of Honor's back now. I don't know.
well, Tony has the first show of interest in signing some of these people, and also, as somebody who does cover NWA, we have seen the OGK show up a bit in NWA. So it's also possible that Taven and Bennett don't want to sign with AEW or with Ring of Honor, which is fine, but. This match where they either got a title shot or they had to disband, it doesn't work in Honor. It doesn't work in Bullet Club's favor for the outcome, because you have to have challengers for those tag titles. And the other issue is that for Honor No More, if they separated, where would they all go? There's no for a couple of their members, there's really no direction. Eddie Edwards can easily plug himself back into the main event status, but his whole character right now is this anti-Impact thing. He was the guy who turned. He was the don't trust anybody of Impact. It's hard for him to have an identity moving forward beyond that. For OGK, it's very easy. You go into the tag division. But for Kenny King, for PCO, and for Vincent, you'd have almost no direction. So I think it's smarter to keep the group together and maybe start to build up more of the tension within the group before you actually can separate them, because you have some place for everybody to fit into.
I'm torn because everything you said makes sense, but I can't help but feel as though this is kind of one of those cases of the total is less than the sum of its parts. In the sense
fair. Yeah,
that
no, I get it.
I think most of these guys have a role to play on Impact, but I have to. This is just me personally. That particular act, I just find it to be. It doesn't do much for me, and I agree with you. I think they've done a nice job of using the guys and getting stuff out of them, and it's a big part of their TV. But I don't know what the ceiling of such an act is. I feel like it may have run its course by this point. I guess it's my read on it. I don't know.
So as somebody who is more dedicated with Impact than I am, I guess my question here is, have they really gone after the world title?
No, I will say
that's where it is. That's where it is.
Let's be careful on the dedicated talk. That could backfire on me. Don't pair those words. As someone I watch it loosely, I don't think so. I think it's very likely that Eddie is the match for Josh at Bound for Glory, which is going to get. Look, I think the match will be killer, but that's going to get one of those reactions we were talking about Eric Young, where people go, "Why?" Right? That's going to be what happens, and maybe unfairly, maybe fairly. I don't know, but it'll be interesting.
Because this is a weird thing, because more than that, when you talk about things looking weird on paper, more than Josh Alexander versus Eddie Edwards for the Impact World Title, stranger on paper is the idea if somebody told you Bullet Club is the face in this feud.
Yeah, it's weird. It's really
weird. Just, it doesn't make sense. Like, they go from being cheered and being loved here to then they're assholes in Japan. Like, it doesn't make sense. But one thing that I will say is that for a group whose identity is Honor No More attacking Impact, kind of not necessarily destroying it from the inside, but proving that the company doesn't care about people, the power is in that world title. You have to go after that world title because the world title symbolizes so much. So if they haven't already, or they haven't done so with a real level of dedication, that has to be where they go before they break up.
I will say too, a couple of weeks ago on TV, they did a vignette or an angle of some kind where Eddie appeared to be trying to convince Josh that he should be on their side of this argument. So
yeah,
I think there's going to be a whole, because obviously Josh had his own conflict with management and Impact. It was a whole build to these title wins. So they'll do different stuff. I think the match itself will be really good. It will be a discourse, as the kids say, but I'm fine with it, I guess. What did you think of the match itself, the big 10-man?
So the match itself was as chaotic as any 10-man no DQ match should be. And that's both good and bad. When it was good, it was really good. When it was bad, it was just like, what is going on here? Why is so much of this happening? The one thing that didn't make sense to me, similar to the previous one, was it's a no DQ match, and they're like, Maria's leaving because she knows what's going to happen. I'm like, wouldn't she stay? And
she could do anything.
It seems weird to me. But yeah, the match. I think that, to me, the biggest takeaway for me was that Ace Austin and Chris Bay, they got to get bigger pushes sooner rather than later. I agree. It's crazy that I think it was Slammiversary 2020. There was such a big push and such a big support for Ace Austin to win that world title in that I think it was fatal 4-way until it turned into a 5-way. But there was such a push for him. And it just seems as though with some people, Impact will drop the ball repeatedly.
I think this is just guesswork. I think there are some guys, there's a real concern about them leaving.
Yeah.
And so they end up in this bizarre middle ground where it's like, we can't push them too strong because they may be done after this, but we can't bury them because they're great talents. So you end up with this, like you just said it 2 years ago, man. It felt like he should be the world champion. He's kind of floated around, right?
And it has its own, and that strategy has another drawback where you unintentionally piss off the talent to make them want to leave.
Yeah, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, right?
Yeah.
It's like he's going to leave anyway. Like, well, maybe he wouldn't. I don't know, man. Maybe push the guys. It's interesting. I'm not sure. We've already liked this show. The next two matches are the things going to kind of put it over the top here. Jordan Grace and Mia Yim up next. Scott Armstrong was in the house. He was the referee here, right? Which was interesting. Hot crowd for this one. We had trading chants. I loved this match, man. They had like a respectful babyface opening, then they got real intense. It was really interesting to me the way that they kind of positioned Jordan as like an underdog for the first, portion of the match. Like Mia was so in control. And Mia, you kind of forget because I think we're all still adjusting to her wrestling regularly again, how believable her offense is, how physical she can be.
Right.
She was very believable in control of a match against Jordan Grace. And I think that's no mean feat. Great work throughout. The crowd loved it. I loved it too. Great to see Mia Yim doing good. John, what do you think of the Knockouts title match?
So I like how you put it with them showing that Mia Yim was in control for so long, but that's kind of what you need to do against Jordan Grace. Mm-hmm. Like she's such a powerhouse, and she is arguably the strongest woman in that division, that you have to show how strong somebody else is, or how well strategy wise somebody else is to beat her. Like Deonna didn't beat her through strength. Deonna beat her through smarts. Right. And here Mia Yim is saying, I have to try to beat you through strength, or at least try that first and take that fight to you. And Jordan is such a great talent for her in-ring work that she is able to elevate somebody's offense and make it look so much better than it may be or may not be. And this was a well thought out match. I think that the slow pace in the beginning did hurt it a little bit, but they did kind of move into that second gear towards the end. And the trading of I will say the one thing I wasn't that big of a fan of was when they ended up, she had Mia Yim in the submission hold, and then Mia breaks the submission hold. That part's great. And then they kept their legs locked together, and that whole like exchange, I was like, this is just the angles of it doesn't seem right to me. Like, I'm trying to smack you like this way, and apparently it's hurting you, but it's not really. So
I
that
really
part
liked
of it. Me.
I did think, to your point about just like that as a general sentiment, more broadly, I did think they kind of fell victim to like they wanted to pack in a lot of stuff at the end. And it was very exciting, but it did, for a match that I think only went 13, 40 minutes, it did feel like they kind of went like a couple kind of sequence back and forth, false finishes too strong, right? It was like there was a slight balance I think they just missed. And I say that so I really loved the match, but I get what you mean. There were a few moments late where it was kind of like, I think you've overthought this slightly, right? So, yeah. It's interesting. I will say the crowd really wanted Mia in the end because she was just so impressive in the match. They were really rocking the title change, which happened in the main event too. They didn't get either, but I think it makes sense, right? The finishes were the right call on both fronts. Jordan won in a kind of sequence. Post-match, we had Masha Slamovich come out. Is that the Bound for Glory match, do you think? Or is there another twist in this tale? She went straight for Jordan. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that maybe... I think Bound for Glory, they could easily turn this into a triple threat.
Yeah. And
I think that might be the way to go. But I think it depends on how much they believe in Masha Slamovich. Yeah. If this is a situation, and there's been some conversation about why is Impact taking so long to push somebody, surprise, surprise, right? We're just talking about that. Yeah. So I think that this is a situation where for them, they have to be very strategic in what they do. But if they do believe in Masha Slamovich, I would do the triple threat. If they don't believe in Masha Slamovich, I would still do the triple threat. And that's where Mia Yim can win the title if you don't believe in Slamovich. But I think the question is going to be what they do at Victory Road. And a part of me wants to believe that it's going to involve Masha, and then somehow Mia's going to get involved, either cause a DQ, something to that effect. Maybe even just a distraction that causes a count out or something like that. Right. But I think the goal is to get to that get to a triple threat, and that would be a great match.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably, there's something to be said for that, because on TV, Masha doesn't even like sell for anyone. She's like a destroyer. So that a triple threat would allow you to kind of balance that, right? She could be a monster without having the match go 6 minutes or whatever. Obviously, to be clear, we both aware she's way better than this. We're talking about their usage of her. To be clear, right? We know she can have a long match and go great with Jordan Grace. It's more the way they use her. I will say, I get a feeling this Mia Yim story is going to be a really interesting lesson to other wrestlers. Because I don't know if you know what the deal is, John, but she signed a very short-term deal with Impact.
Okay, yeah, I know. I'm not that up to speed on that.
When I think she signed a 6-month deal. Okay.
Wow.
Now, when she signed that deal, Vince McMahon was still in charge over at WWE, and Keith Lee was relatively new in AEW, but more than that, the women's division, they were looking at bringing in some other people that may now be back in WWE, which, that goes without saying. You see them on Monday nights. And I think there is a lesson that may be learned at the end of this, and I could be completely wrong, folks. There could be no offer waiting for her. But I think that when this 6-month deal comes up, Mia may find herself in a position where now both companies are more interested than they were when she signed, which I don't know where you're at on this, but as a sports fan, it's like some wrestlers could learn from. You don't have to sign 5-year deals every single time, man. Like things can change quickly. That could be an interesting story, I think, to watch for. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think that we're seeing that a lot in sports in general. Yeah. In football, people signing shorter American football, people signing shorter contracts. We see that in the NBA as well. Baseball, not so much as people still they sign for longer terms just because of how baseball works. But this is a great teaching moment to say always keep your options open. Always, because there's no harm in signing a 6-month deal or a 1-year deal and then showing to Impact that, hey, not only did I deserve the 6 months, but I'm going to deserve another 6 months with a pay bump. And if it doesn't work out, or either you have some issues there with Impact and the negotiating table, then you always can rely on another company because you have the body of work. And it's a big belief in betting on yourself. And I got to say, for Mia Yim, that is something that I got to give kudos to her because she could also be in a position where Keith Lee wanted to sign with AEW. He signs and she has to make a decision herself. And the question for her is, what if I go to Impact? You tell me what it's like in AEW. I'll help bring my stock up a little bit more, get some people reacquainted with me, et cetera, et cetera. And then if I want to, I can hop over to AEW 6 months from now, or I can stay in Impact. So kudos to her for betting on herself. It's
important to remember, right? The WWE run ended up being a disaster. It wasn't her fault, but she didn't wrestle for a year. I mean, it was ridiculous. So the idea of now being able to come into an AEW, perhaps with some momentum and some excitement around your name, is good. I couldn't be happy for it. It's a really interesting kind of story, I think, in terms of free agency in wrestling. Let's move to the main event now. Probably the most premier free agent who has no interest in signing away. Alex Shelley just has great matches everywhere, and he's like, I'll do my thing. Josh Alexander, Alex Shelley. Look, everyone knew this was going to be great. It was every bit as good as I hoped it would be. I thought this was a classic world title match. I would be very intrigued to see a list of TNA Impact World Title matches that are better than this, genuinely, because I think this was incredible. Classic opening. I love the intensity that Shelley wrestled with and the way that he treated the match like what the story was, which is this was his first shot after all of these years. And there was a desperation, and it wasn't comedic or over the top or ridiculous. It was just a pro wrestler trying to win. And man, was it great. What did you think of the main event?
So when they did the injury angle with Josh's knee, my first thought was, man, did they really why would you do that? What's the point of, because now he's got to sell the knee throughout the rest of this match. And then as soon as Shelley kept going after that knee, I was like, this was brilliant because this really is Shelley's first opportunity at a world title. And he needs to do, not just for himself, but he needs to do the one thing that the other Machine Gun was able to do. He has to have that. And so it's just like that. You can't call somebody an Alex Shelley mark and say, here's your autograph, like they did in that amazing contract signing segment, and not show this level of desperation, because there is a level of respect that he has for Alexander and that Alexander has for him. And I think that Alexander played his role absolutely beautifully because these were two faces, but something's got to give in that situation. And Alexander, how you can't build sympathy for him against Shelley when you're telling me over and over again that Shelley's never had this, he's never done it. Like you automatically want Shelley to win. So what do? You do this injury angle so that Alexander has to fight from underneath. And what I think commentary did a good job was noting that this was the first match or one of the first matches in Alexander's title run that he was the stronger of the two guys. So as soon as you tell me he's the stronger of the two guys, it automatically makes me root for Shelley more. But then when then this injury angle happens, you're like, wow, now can Alexander use that strength that is now being hindered to find a way to get the win? So I think it was a very well thought out beginning of the match. And I think that towards the middle and the end, it played out step by step very, very well. Some of the moves were just really cool to see. And when Alexander started pulling out the tombstones, I'm like, man, this is a guy who knows he has to put away his opponent, and he's got to risk everything because a tombstone, you're landing on your knee. It's just like that level of I gotta find a way. I gotta put Shelley away because I know I've seen from day one back in 2005 when I went to my first wrestling show. I know the resiliency of Alex Shelley. So I thought this was a very well paired up match, and it does kind of make me sad that a part of me thinks that they're not going to revisit this, and I think that it's something that they could revisit down the road. I have what I have a feeling is that somehow, some way, Shelley and Alexander are going to do the mutual respect thing, and Honor No More is going to go after the title, and that's how they'll get some multi-man matches with the Machine Guns and maybe Kushida helping Alexander to run interference against Honor No More. And maybe OGK get those title belts from Gallows Anderson, and then at Bound for Glory we get Guns versus OGK. A part of me just like thinks like that
makes sense because they
where
on TV they kind of overlap those on TV. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. My concern in terms of them continuing it, and I don't think it's going to, but it did cross my mind. I really hope they don't do the he's so desperate he turns heel thing with Shelley. Don't do it.
No.
The audience loves him. What you really should learn from this, if you're the Impact booker, is eventually they should actually tell this story of him winning the belt. Because people, you can tell, the audience really wanted it, and it wasn't the time this night, but that should be a no, let's get here eventually. Maybe he beats the next heel champ, however it may work. But no, absolutely, you nailed it in terms of the desperation. The tombstone spot was fabulous. Josh, the selling. Josh Alexander, everyone thinks of him as like a physical kind of technical wrestling, and he is all those things, but man, his understanding of psychology and selling is so tremendous. I mean, because the first part of the match, Shelley worked the arm, right? And then the leg, he kind of fell into it almost. And he sold both. The selling of the knee, I thought was magnificent. So it was great. Shelley is genuinely one of the best wrestlers of the last 20 years, and we always forget him when we list those wrestlers. In terms of just in ring, you look at his body of work, he's been great for genuinely most of the last 20 years. So hell of a time. I will say, to me, the core idea of the match was that Shelley wrestled the perfect match and Josh had openings. I thought the finish was more emphatic than I would have guessed it would be with how they told the story. I assumed that Josh was going to catch him with something or kind of catch the ankle. I know he was more flat than that, but that's fine. Match was great. Anything else on the main event, John?
Man, I do agree with you. I really hope they don't do the turn heel thing because that kind of thing only works if the person is a singles person.
Yeah.
If he turns heel, then if he wins the title, then you got to do Sabin versus Shelley again because Sabin's going to be like, I got to snap you out of this weird, funk you're in. And it gets too complicated. I think that keeping him a face and chasing Josh would be really cool. And to your point, I think that maybe sometime next year, maybe even as early as January, Genesis started the year off with the year of Shelley. that would be a great time to pull the trigger on this title reign, because Josh will have held it for a long for a year by then, assuming he doesn't lose to somebody like an Eddie Edwards or whoever he faces at Bound for Glory.
Yeah, I actually prefer Josh just holding it and then dropping it to Shelley down the line than like Eddie getting a run in the middle. I mean, I like Eddie Edwards, but I just don't think that really serves much purpose beyond, doing it for the sake of doing it. I'm with you, absolutely. Run this back, give it some time, but run it back eventually. I think people will be with it. Okay, fair to say the main event was the match of the show, right? It was kind of silly to him. I mean, it was a really good show, but the main event was, on its own level. Are you more interested in watching on Thursday now, or is it still one of those deals of
it's one of the things I do want to add is I have a special place in my heart for Ethan Page, but because my fiance is a pure wrestling fan, and what I mean by that is she will always boo the heels and she will always cheer the faces. No matter what, unless somebody's really that damn good as being a heel, so for example, her two favorites are Omega and Moxley, and when Omega turned heel on Moxley, as it so happened, it almost broke her heart. But I have a special place for Ethan Page because Ethan was the freelance wrestling world champion, which is one of the promotions here in Chicago. And the first time I took her to an indie show, the feud was Kylie Ray and Ethan Page. Kylie wasn't there at the show, but Ethan had a promo, and in the promo, he said some very mean things about Kylie Ray.
I'm sure.
and my fiance did not like that one bit. So she's always hated Ethan Page, and as a result, in order to troll her, I've always loved Ethan Page. But because of that, when the North split up and Ethan left and Josh remained, a part of me was like, we don't need that Josh Alexander guy. Like, as long as we got Ethan Page, we're great. Like, send him to AEW. This is gonna be awesome. And now there's a twofold thing in it for me. One, I really wish Josh Alexander had come to AEW because some of those tag matches, seeing his work as a single source, some would have been great. At the same time, a part of me is glad he stayed in Impact because I don't think he would have had the shine, the focus that he has here at Impact, and being able to be considered the guy, and just that level of commitment that Impact has to him. And I don't think he would have had that in AEW.
I agree.
So, yeah. He's been a great champion.
It's better for wrestling that he's there, right? Yeah. If that makes the Impact benefits greatly from having this level of main event. They can bank on a great main event every month, and that's good for wrestling as well. By the way, it does. When you set that story up with he has a special place in your heart, I thought you were going to say, my fiance hates all the heels, but Ethan Page is such a great guy online and stuff that he's the one heel. She's like, I love that it was the complete opposite. I love that it was simply
man. So I think it was the second Starcast. So it would have been for the first All Out. He was there, and I got to talk to him. And she was at work, and she was coming over, and I was telling him how much she hated him because of what he had said about Kylie Ray. And because the other thing is, but my girlfriend's like one of the nicest people on the planet. She hates bullies. She hates people who are mean to other people and all that kind of stuff. Ethan Page cursing out Kylie Ray, a woman, and talking about how he wants to beat the shit out of this woman. Like,
he's pretty mean.
Oh my God, it's going to be great. So I'm explaining this to him, and like a part of me thought he's just going to completely act in character, right? Like he's just going to be like, well, screw your girlfriend, whatever, right? He goes, that honestly means a lot to me because it means I'm doing my job. He's like, it means I'm connecting to, like, it's like that tells me that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I was like, God, she needs to beat traffic so she can get here and I can have her. I can have it.
He has an old school look at heel work, like he ain't going to be in character at a meet and greet. He ain't like, that old school, but he absolutely enjoys the idea of making people hate him. It's like, that's his special trait. Good.
No, I was just gonna say that's something that's really great when wrestlers like stay in character during meet and greets and are able to use like what the person says to.
It takes balls, man. Yeah, it takes balls. When MJF would do stuff, I'd be like, man, this is gonna end in disaster one day. He's there's a line, I guess, right? He's managed to walk it well enough thus far. Okay, John, promote all the good things of True Heat yourself, wherever you want to promote, pal. Floor is yours. Go ahead.
Absolutely, guys. I want to thank you guys for tuning into this. First off, Impact has had some great shows and continues to put on great monthly specials. Same way that everybody here at Late Night Grin does great shows, great
Well,
specials.
we do shows. I don't know about
Well,
great shows. You know, shows
sir, don't undercut yourself. But that's also what we do over on the True Heels YouTube channel. And I talked about in the beginning, we have shows for pretty much every single promotion that you can think of. We had Fusion of Honor for a while there we were covering Ring of Honor and MLW Fusion at the same time. Hopefully Tony, when he gets his TV deal for Ring of Honor, I can bring Fusion of Honor back. But we cover almost every single promotion. And we have watch-alongs for pay-per-views, for episodes of TV, for different promotions. We do it all. And we have a Patreon tier. $3 a month is your entry-level tier. You can get access to so much more than they're able to show on YouTube because New Japan puts copyright strikes on any of their images that you use. So that's the kind of stuff that you can get on our Patreon. You can get our merch at ProWrestlingTees.com. You can follow our new sports channel, THH Sports, where we talk about football, American football, basketball, baseball. Just on Saturday, we had a watch along for UFC and boxing. So we cover everything, and we're all over the place. But thank you, Joe, for having me, man. I appreciate it. We had a great time on the Death Before Dishonor preview, and I had a great time here today, man.
My pleasure, pal. I think you're doing a great job. I'm, sorry I wasn't familiar with you earlier, but I think you're doing a hell of a job. So I think we'll be sharing the screen again in future, folks.
For sure.
So everyone,
for sure. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Okay, folks, I'm going to be back in 45 minutes for something that is unprecedented on this very platform. We're going to watch Raw tonight. Okay, now I have not watched Raw live in a very, very, very long time. I mean, but I think the show's been good the last 2 weeks. And tonight has Bobby Lashley and AJ Styles, which I can't, I have this urge. I got to do it. So rather than just watch it on my own and tweet about it, we're going to be back on this very Twitch, top of the hour, Raw. Feel free to join. It's probably going to be just me. I think Bob might hop on. But it'll mostly just be me kind of talking to myself about AJ Styles still being good in 2022, which is what I would be doing if I wasn't on the air. So Raw Grin Along coming up at the top of the hour. I'm going to post the on-demand video to the Patreon, so you'll see it somewhere or another. I think the content will be good whether you watch Raw or not. So, folks, I back top of the hour. Support John. See a lot of love in the chat. The Grinners agree with my take, John.
Appreciate it,
good
guys.
At this,
appreciate it.
All right, folks. See you at the top of the hour. In the meantime, enjoy this outro. Well.